All right, well, let's now bring in this discussion Professor Christopher Isike. He is the director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria, to also weigh in on these developments. A very good afternoon to you, Professor, and thank you so much for joining us. Look, Putin brought in his Belarusian counterpart on the situation in Russia, and we saw those negotiations leading to, of course, the charges against Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner leader, being dropped. What is the reaction to these developments out in Russia, you think, Prof?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. This is a very significant turn of events. It is the most significant, challenge to Russia since Putin took over power 23 years ago. And like he himself described, the Wagner mutiny is kind of similar to the 1917 revolution that led to the collapse of imperial Russia, and the full impact of this is going to unfold with time.
And Professor, we've just heard from our reporters on the ground there that, of course, that since the troops have retreated, it's back to business as usual as of tomorrow.
Well, that's possible, but we don't know the terms of the agreement yet. Whether it would include for Prigozhin, to abandon the war in Ukraine. If he does that, he had one of the issues he raised on Saturday was that the generals, the military, have been feeding President Putin lies about Ukraine, and that's what made him to take a decision to go there in the first place. If that is correct, then you would expect that if he's a man of principle, he would not continue to fight in Ukraine. If that is the case, then we would see that it will not be business as usual there. However, if that did not include it in terms of the agreement, then it will be business as usual, as you have said. And that then means that it would not impact the war in Ukraine as much as, pundits have been saying since Saturday.
And Prof, do you think then the situation weakens Russia's standing on its war against Ukraine and NATO allies?
It does in many ways, because it weakens Russia's military in the battlefield, especially if the Wagner group leaves the battlefield. The Wagner group have been a very, very significant actor that has helped to push up Russia's strength in the field, its fortunes in the field, and then also it serves this mutiny is going to have a blow to the morale of Russian troops, because of the evident weakening of Putin's power. And then relatedly, the mutiny has also highlighted Putin's invisibility, politically. Like I said before, this has been the biggest challenge he's had. And then it also highlighted Russia's weakness. Of course, we know that the war in Ukraine has highlighted Russia's weaknesses militarily, but this mutiny, particular one, has also further served to deal a blow to that.
And Professor, look, Russia's foreign minister is today, as we understand, meeting with the Chinese counterparts to discuss what they call are matters of concern. What can you speculate about this meeting, especially at this time?
I think the idea is to show strength, that despite the mutiny in Russia, it will not affect how we are, what our priorities are as a state. We've seen that even yesterday, there were shots fired, missiles fired at Ukraine, almost 50 missiles, 10 of which were actually gunned down by the Ukrainian forces. So the whole idea is to continue to keep things the way they are, show strength, but it does that is expected. No surprises there, and I expect that this will continue, to reassure its partners that we are back to business as usual, as you said earlier on.
And then, Prof, as it stands now, tensions have somehow subsided until we know, of course, what is contained in that agreement. So we now go back to the drawing board of whether or not Putin will grace South African shores in August for the BRICS summit. What do you think?
Well, I think that this helps South Africa in many ways because it's very unlikely that he's going to leave matters as they are, and then leave the country. He's not likely to leave the country in the next 3-4 months, if my guess is right, because he is a very security conscious person, and one of his strengths is his internal security, and perhaps one of the things that we need to also talk about is that the loyalty of this mutiny will impact on the loyalty of Russia's security forces, and especially the Russian National Guard, which have over 350,000 forces, and they are personally loyal to Putin. If this affects them in any way, it is going to impact not only how this crisis plays out, but also it will impact on Putin and the war in Ukraine broadly. So Putin would need to remain at home, ensure that all is as it should be. And in fact, he will even be more careful now because people that are very close to him, so like Prigozhin, have been the one that are now probably going to be his undoing. So he needs to really recalibrate, and that will include having to stay in Russia. So I think that even the Russia-Africa summit slated to hold there in July would have to be off the card because he would need to secure his position politically and militarily before daring to leave the country.
Interesting analysis. Thank you so much, Professor. That was Professor Christopher Isike, of course, giving us some insight on the latest Russian developments.